from the college by the lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
I am most pleased to welcome to our program today Mr. Milt Stafford, who is a lifelong resident of Idaho, and he is a veteran of World War II. Mr. Stafford, in coming on our program, insists that he is not a hero during World War II and only did his job as a soldier. He insists that the real heroes of World War II are those women and men who died for democracy. But I do want you to hear his story. It is a most interesting one, particularly in Italy, and he was present at the site where Mussolini was hung on at the end of the war, after he was shot and then hung. I wish to also add that Mr. Stafford was awarded the Purple Heart. Milt, I've known you for some time, and I thank you so much for coming today, and it's very kind of you to do so, and we welcome you to our program. And we've just recently been recognizing Veterans Day, which we should do each year, and you, like many others, are honored on that given day. And I'm very pleased to welcome to the program, as always, our regular panelist, Steve Schenck, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and I shall ask Steve to commence the questioning of our guest today.
Thank you, Tony. Mr. Stafford, why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about how it was you entered the service and came to leave home and go overseas to join the war?
Well, I left Coeur d'Alene in 1943, January 1943, and there was 90 of us that left here all at one time, and I was the only unlucky sucker that went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. We had our 13 weeks basic training at Fort Douglas at Utah. Then they shipped us out, and out of the whole bunch that left Coeur d'Alene, I was the only one that went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and joined up with a artillery unit. And that's where I took my basic training. Mostly went overseas as a heavy-duty truck driver, and I drove truck in the States. That's about all my truck driving I got. When I landed in Africa, I was a foot soldier mostly. We did a lot of hiking. We didn't do much riding. We did a lot of hiking.
What was the feeling like then? In 1943, the United States had been in the war for a better part of a year and a half, I'd say, and you probably were well aware that you were going to go over and join in that war effort. What did it feel like in the barracks? What was the talk like?
Well, it was we didn't know what we was getting into. I was 19 years old. I was just a kid, and I'd never been away from home before in my life, and I was very nervous, and I never did all the time that I was in service. I'm probably getting ahead of here, but all the time I was in service, I never did get a furlough, never got home at all. It was a tough situation for a young country kid that had never been away from home. When we left Oklahoma and started going from state to state to state, different outfits, and then we got to New York. Well, that's when it was tough. We knew we was in for something then, because they loaded us on transports, and away we went.
Ships? When you say transports?
Ships. Mm-hmm. I can't remember, but it seemed to me like there was something like 20-some thousand of us on this one ship that went across. And at that time, we were going across the Atlantic, and there was still submarines, and but we was lucky. We got there, and we landed at Oran, Africa, July the 4th, 1943. And we had all wool ODs, and it was hot and no shade, and there we was. And we was told that we wasn't even supposed to be there. We were supposed to land someplace up in Alaska. Well, we was a long ways from Alaska.
Were you did you join a unit when you boarded the ship, or were you distributed?
No, we did not join. We was distributed around. We didn't know if we was going into infantry, artillery, or what. But in my case, we was trained in the artillery, and I landed in an artillery outfit, and that was in Africa. And after we got going and a few things, they put me in it was a 633rd Field Artillery, and they called them the Long Toms, and that's how we got there. And then my first action of sea in action was when we made an invasion of Sicily, and we landed at Palermo, and then that's where I joined the outfit, and then we come in on the beaches with our equipment.
Give me a little more sense of time. You arrived in Africa in July. How long did it take you to get from Africa to Sicily until you saw your first combat?
I don't remember. I can't remember the dates and everything, but it seemed like it was a period of not too long a period, because the front was moving pretty fast, and they wanted to get going. I can't remember exactly the dates and everything it was.
Were you training at that time while you were in Africa, or just basically trying to find a unit and joining it?
We would no training. Our training we were just going from here to there and riding what they call 40 and 8s and going across and getting to an outfit.
I see.
Milt, you and I have had several conversations that's been so helpful. Take us through the average day of what life was like in Africa as you're on your way to Sicily, and what you did and other responsibilities of the men.
I didn't do very much of anything, but just did a lot of crying and wondered where we was at. And we was on our way up through there, and we was under air attack several times, but we made it through without getting banged up or anything like that. And then we landed at Bizerti, I think is what it was, in Africa. And then they transported us and got us into our outfits that we was going to go. Some of them went to different ACAC, and I landed in the 633rd Field Artillery. And like I said before, they was called the Long Tom outfit. There was 3 batteries of us over there: A battery, B battery, and C battery. Each battery had 4 guns, and that's where I got hooked up with the 633rd Field Artillery.
Now, as you were going along, and there were those air attacks, and you didn't know when they were coming next, and I know that creates an awful difficult tension for everyone. But talk about some of the things that you did. You had to do a lot of digging, didn't you, and foxholes and so forth?
Not in Africa.
That was when you got into Italy.
We didn't do very much of that in Africa, but when we got to Sicily, that's when we started digging. And my first action was at I think it was Palermo. That's where we landed, and we come in on the beach, and they landed us right with the infantry. They went and overshot their mark, and here we come in with the infantry, and we landed at night, and it was my first action. That was it. We started seeing all kinds of hell, and there was shooting and everything else going on, and our truck that I was in was the lead truck to mark for markers, and we had to have men come off for markers to guide the rest of them. And when they kept hollering for a man, you're next, you're next, you're next, well, I kept getting deeper in the truck. And I was fortunate I didn't have to get off the truck, because I didn't know what I'd have done if I'd have got off the truck, because I was scared to death. And they was shooting all around us, and soldiers was falling and everything else all around us, but I was lucky to get through it.
And tell us about some of the assignments of having to dig for, I assume, for hours and hours for protection, like digging the trenches and the foxholes.
Well, you automatically, when an artillery shell came in on you, you automatically dug to protect yourself, because if you didn't get under the ground or close to the ground, well, when an artillery shell broke, well, you was ready for shrapnel of all kinds. And I didn't do as much digging in Sicily, because the war ended so fast. We went through it pretty quick. And in Sicily, that's where they made me a GI cook. One of the cooks went AWOL and stole a Jeep from the captain, and they come and told me that I was to report to the kitchen, and I wasn't going to report to the kitchen because I'd been on KP the day before. But in the Army, you do what they tell you to do. So I reported to the kitchen, and I became a cook the rest of the campaign through Sicily. And so my foxhole digging wasn't too great, and then I carried a lot of ammunition, 100-pound shells and things. But after they made me a cook, well, then I was back with the kitchen. But our kitchen stayed right with the front, pretty much with our outfit. They stayed with us all the time.
You have a real interesting story. We've heard so much about the personality and character of General Patton, and he came and visited your unit. And tell us about that story and what happened.
He came down through our outfit there one day, and he was very strong on uniform. And everybody started hollering, "Here comes the general, here comes the general." And so we had to get our leggings on and our helmets on and so on and so forth. And he came down through and congratulated us with what we'd done and so on and so forth. And I was in the kitchen at that time, and I offered him a cup of coffee. And he said, "Yeah." He says, "I think that's good." He said, "I'll have a cup." So he did. So that was the closest I ever was to General Patton.
He was a very impressive man.
He was strictly, yes, he was very, very strictly on Army, and Patton was go get him. He didn't want to back up from nobody, and he wasn't afraid of nobody. He wanted to go, and he did. He went right on through. And then when the war ended in Sicily, well, then we regrouped, got some more equipment. Then we was ready for the invasion of Italy.
And Steve, I'll let you pick up at this point.
Tell us how that happened. How did you? Was it again a troop transport by ship that got you from Sicily and Ireland to the Italian mainland?
We boarded a ship. Well, I think they were just open ships, LSTs mostly. There was 2 guns and trucks on each board. No, I think that's what there was too. And we went from there to we boarded ship at Messina. That was right up on the coast. Well, the Germans had all pretty much pulled out of there and left the Italians back. That's the reason the Sicily front went so fast, because the Italians, they wasn't fighting people. They didn't want to stay there and fight. So we boarded the ship and we landed we had to stay out in the harbor for, I think it was 1 day before we could land our equipment for the infantry to advance up ahead. And we landed at Italy then, at Salerno is where we landed. And we landed 3+3rd day after the infantry had hit and everything. We landed the 3rd day. And that was starting us up through the country of Italy. And they put on a big front there to hold us back, and it was a real battle from then on. And that's when you learned how to dig foxholes.
Now, at that point, you met German forces as well as Italian forces back on the
Italian
mainland?
We met German forces, and they was tough ones. They had a line up across the whole country of Italy across there. And they was not going to let nobody through there, but they finally broke through. And our artillery outfit was considered a backup for all divisions. We was with all the divisions in Italy, just about. Whoever got hung up and needed heavy stuff to break up a concentration, they generally called in the 633rd Field Artillery.
So they kept you sort of a mobile reserve that moved across the front?
We was in the front all the time. We was under enemy fire constantly, but wherever they needed us, we generally packed up and helped them out.
Well, tell us a little bit more about these long toms you've talked about. Those are large pieces of equipment. How did you move those around the front?
Well, they was the prime mover that pulled them, and the gun itself was 30 ton. And there was 15 ton apiece, and there was a tank, sort of a tank thing that pulled them. They was on tracks. They'd hook onto them, and away they'd go with them. And they was very strong. There was all diesel motors, and they pulled them through pretty heavy.
Tell us a little about the artillery piece itself.
Well, it was everybody called them the Long Tom, and the Germans and the Italians, every time they'd see it, they hated it. When the prisoners would come by, they'd just hate it. They'd say, there's one of them so-and-so's right there. And we called them Long Tom. They would shoot at approximately 135 miles, and we could lay one right in somebody's pocket at 32 miles. And we broke up a lot of supply lines and things like that. They'd forward OPs would get us zeroed in on them, and we'd break up some of them.
And an OP is
an OP is forward observer.
And they gave you the coordinates that you actually shot at.
Yeah, they give us coordinates, and so then after we got going up through Italy and Naples fell, well, the next big battle was coming up across the valleys, and we ran into mountains and everything else, and the next big push was trying to get to Rome.
Let me interrupt you for just a second. What were you thinking at this point? Obviously, you're on the advance and the enemy's retreating. Did you have the sense that the war might end anytime soon, or were you feeling confident?
No, we didn't think the war was going to end. We didn't think it'd ever end because there was bombarding us, and the Germans had an artillery piece that they called the 88. And the 88 was considered an ACAC gun, but they used it as an artillery piece also, and it was deadly. They could use it, and it was a deadly piece of equipment. Well, we learned right then that we was up against pretty stiff competition.
Well, let me let you get back now after you explained that your attitude at the time. Were you telling us about Rome? The next target was Rome?
Well, that was our next Rome, but the winter of '43 come along. 44, I guess. And so we got bogged down pretty heavy, and then we run into a pretty stiff composition at Cassino. Well, Cassino was a big abbey up there, and General Clark had orders that not to touch it because it was a shrine. Well, they figured the Germans was using it as a forward OP, and there was a big setting up there all by itself, and a great big monastery. And the town of Cassino, I have pictures of it, and it was completely wiped right out. But we sat there, our outfit sat there and was lobbing shells into the town of Cassino. We didn't dare shoot at that because we had orders not to. But then when they gave orders to finally take it and try to take it, well, then they sent the Air Force in to bomb it. And the first load of bombs that, I think there was B-24s come over, the first load of bombs they come in, daylight bombing, and they missed their target by a few hundred yards, and they dumped them on the Americans. And our captain and we was all out there calling them so-and-so names and everything else, and they said, open up. So we shot at our own troops with rifles and everything else, just because they dropped their eggs way short. And it was pretty scary at that time. And so, but they finally got zeroed in on it. Then when the Air Force softened it up, the 34th, the 36th, the 45th, and several other outfits tried to take it, and they could not get up that mountain. And that's when we come in with our stuff to try to give them heavy artillery support. We shot hundreds and hundreds of rounds right into the abbey itself to soften it up for the infantry to take it. But it was a tough battle. That was one of the toughest battles that we ran into, and going up through Italy.
I probably ought to move you forward because I know that Tony wants to spend about our last 10 minutes of the show talking about Mussolini. So if you could move us to that point, or do you want to move straight into the question?
Thank you, Steve. I want to get into some photographs that were brought by Milt. We want our viewers to get to see this, and they'll bring up on the screen at this time those photographs. You've already been talking, Milt, about some of the war equipment, and you brought a few photographs. We're going to show a few, and if we can have that first one at this time, I'll let you describe what we have here.
Well, that is those 4 guns is Battery B. We were sitting in position someplace in Italy, I don't know where, but we were sitting in position ready for a fire mission right there. And the way they're pitched, as high as they're pitched and everything, we was after something way back, quite a ways back.
More distance.
Yeah, it was a distance shot, and that's how they set them up for distance shots. And we was elevated pretty high there.
And there are times when you would do them at a lower level if you were more short.
Like when we was shooting into casino there at the Abbey, there was a little knoll right in front of us. They called it Mount Trocia. Mm-hmm. Well, we just shot just clear of that to get direct fire, and we was shooting almost straight into it.
If we could have the next photograph, we'll show what else that you've brought. This is one of the guns or barrels, right?
This is one of the barrels on the gun that after so many hundreds of rounds that went through it, we had to replace them, and that was one of our replacement barrels that they shipped over to us, and we had to replace it on one of our guns. And all the guns wasn't used all at the same time. Lots of times they was, but some of the times they wasn't. Mm-hmm. And the ones that the riflings in them and everything, when they got hot and kind of got real bad, well, then we had to replace them.
When you get a look at this as we did, you can see how slow that you would have to move with that kind of heavy equipment. Now, this is something that was captured from the Germans, wasn't it?
That was captured that was captured. The infantry got that, and I don't remember the town that it was in, but they called it Anzio Annie. That's what the Americans named it, and it was on 2 flat cars. It was long flat cars, and it was about a 24-inch gun. And the man that's standing up there on top of that is one of my buddies, and then they tied a rope on me, and I was the youngest one and the slimmest one, and so I crawled through the barrel. And they tied a rope on me in case I got hung up in there. They could pull me back out.
What was the purpose for going through the barrel?
Just the idea to go through it, just something to do.
Something to do.
Yeah, just something to do.
On a moment when you had the time.
Yeah, we had time, and it was just something, curiosity.
One of the reasons, too, for you being on the program, this is a real, I guess, rare photograph. So you took this photograph. Would you tell our viewers what this is?
This is Mussolini himself and his henchman that they captured, and they captured him in a town called Denango. And that was right at the border of Italy and Switzerland.
And he's the third person from the left.
He's the third one there, is the one they got. And the Patriots, they caught him and brought him down there, that they'd already shot him, killed all of them before they hung him on that gas station kind of affair is what it was.
And so you and other American soldiers came by, and he had not been there too long, and you had a camera, and you captured this scene for history, really.
I took I don't know why, but I had a 120 box camera, a little box camera, and I took pictures with it, and I captured that picture, and I don't know if there's any more like it or not, but I got it, and then I got back on the truck, and then we headed on up for our next position was headed up towards the Alps.
Let's back up just for a minute. I want to make sure we got that in, and we did get in before time was up, but prior to his being found in this truck, and all of them were removed, and they were shot, and then he was hung here at this gas station. There's more story about Mussolini. Would you just share that with our viewers prior to his actually being captured that particular time?
Well, I was told that he was trying to get free and everything, and he was in the Italians had captured him and put him in prison, and Hitler wanted him back to try to get him started, reorganized, and try to get some more, keep going. Hitler didn't think he was through yet, so they sent a glider outfit. Germans sent a glider outfit in, and they released him from prison. They got him away, and they released him, and they brought him and tried to get him back to where he was going to be safe. But where he was headed for, nobody knows. I don't know, or nobody else knows where he was headed for. But he was trying to get free, is what he was trying to do, and then that's when they nailed him up there someplace in Switzerland.
And he was trying to get away on this truck, and how did they find out that that was him in the truck? I assume he and the others were hiding in this truck.
Well, they was covered up with tarps and whatever they had to cover him up, and they was trying, and one of the patriots that saw him, they saw his boot. The story I was told, that they saw his boot, and so they uncovered him, and there they was. And
those were German boots they had on. And
yeah, it was, and they discovered him by his boots, and then they got him out of the truck. I did not see this happen or anything, but they got him out of the truck, and he was. I read it in the history over there that he made a statement that he was through, but he didn't want to be shot in the back or anything. He said, "If you're going to shoot me, I want to be shot face on." And they did. They unloaded. They let them all have it at the same time through there. They lined them up, and that was it.
That's Steve Shink.
I know that like a lot of other veterans, you don't particularly enjoy talking about some of the harsher aspects of the war. And there was I don't want to call it a more human side, but you had some time that you spent doing things other than fighting and soldiering. And you have some great stories to tell about some of your pets in camp and a little girl you sort of adopted for a while. Could you tell us about that briefly?
We did have spare time, but I was a cook all the way through Italy, and my spare time was I was cook 3 meals, and then I could, kind of roam around. But you didn't want to roam around too much because there was land mines and fields, and you didn't want to get involved too much. But I went back. We had to always go get water for our troops, and we had our tank truck, and we always had to have a man that would man the 50 caliber machine gun. Had to have that. Well, one day I volunteered, first time and last time, but I volunteered to be the man to run the 50 caliber, and we was on our way back, and his name was Kershaw, and he was an Italian-born kid, and here come a F-109 strafing us. Well, I was pretty brave. I bailed off the truck. I never fired a shot.
Milt, I'm going to have to interrupt you. I wish we had time to continue. We just got started, and we thank you so much on behalf of Steve Shink and our staff for being with us. I have learned so much in these meetings I've had with you, and you were very thoughtful to come be with us today, and we appreciate it very much. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Milt Stafford, talking about World War II, and we'd like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time when we shall discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.